Hello, everyone. Welcome to session 23 of the conference. The title of our session today is Exploring the World Within University Internationalization at Home. We're delighted to be joined by truly distinguished panelists and looking forward to a really engaged and fruitful conversation on the issue of internationalization at home. Before I invite the panelists to introduce themselves and make their opening comments, I just wanted to say a bit about the theme in general. For me, internationalization at home really conjures the relationship, the dynamic, the mutually constitutive, ever-changing back and forth between the global and the local. And so in that, starting from that point of departure, I just wrote down 3 questions that came to my mind as I was thinking through the very idea of internationalization at home. First, in the global South particularly, but really everywhere, do we need a phase of localization or finding our roots again so we can reconnect with our strengths and identify what we have to offer to internationalization and intercultural dialogue? Second, could internationalization at home be student-driven? Should it be student-driven? And let's say hypothetically, if it could be student-driven, why haven't institutions with large numbers of international students not been able to achieve curricular and pedagogical diversity? And lastly, is it still meaningful to discuss internationalization at home? Or do we rather need an alternative framework which could maybe capture some of our movement forward, some of our ongoing practices better, and lead us down a more promising way forward? So in other words, do we need to move away from discussions of internationalization at home and opt for a more realistic agenda, let's say? So with that in mind, I would invite our panelists to share their thoughts, to share their initial experiences with internationalization at home. What are their associations with the concept? And before we do that, I thought we might introduce ourselves instead of me doing a round of introductions, since you can really Google search all of our panelists and find out where they come from, where they are. I thought we could all begin by really identifying our positionality the positionality that we come from when we are participating in this conversation today. And for me, I would say that I am an internationalization practitioner. I am really interested in exploring the potential for internationalization of higher education in promoting intercultural dialogue and understanding. And I am someone who realizes that those of us who are practicing internationalization and thinking about it in the global South really do have a great responsibility to identify, recognize, and share the best of what we have to offer in the internationalization arena. So that would be my positionality and where I'm coming from in today's conversation. And I would ask the panelists to kindly outline their project before they lay out their opening thoughts for us today. May I start with Professor Shamir? Milette, would you like to begin?
Thank you. I'd be happy to, and I'm very happy to be joining you today, and thanks for the invitation. In the spirit of what you just outlined of our introducing our positionality, I will say that I have been a professor at Tel Aviv University for a long time in the field of American Studies. And in that capacity, I've worked academically for many years on thinking transnationally about local cultures, particularly transnationalizing American studies as a field. And in the past 3 years, I've also been appointed the Vice President of Tel Aviv University for all international activities on campus. And it is really from that perspective that I'd like to offer just very short preliminary comments. I really want to make just one simple point that I draw from my experience as Vice President in charge of internationalization. And this is not a philosophical or pedagogical point. I take as a given for a discussion the vital importance in today's world of providing students with an education that has meaningful exposure to international content, to international experiences. I'm really excited, KALYANI, by the questions that you've raised, which kind of can push us to think about what exactly that means, and do we want to continue to think in these terms? But I want to say something not about why internationalization at home is important, but about how we can work to achieve it on the level of university leadership and university administration. And my one-word answer to that question is centralization. I'll just say a word about Tel Aviv University to set the context a little bit. Tel Aviv University is the highest ranked university in Israel. It's also the largest university in Israel. We have around 30,000 students that hail from all sectors of Israeli society, from all around the world, with around 3,000 international students coming to Tel Aviv University annually. The primary language of instruction is Hebrew, which is, of course, one challenge in internationalization at home. But we also have a substantial number of courses on all levels that are taught in English. I will also say, by way of context, that Tel Aviv University is perhaps Israel's most diversified institution of learning in terms of disciplines. We have 9 faculties that are divided into 35 schools and over 100 departments, and they stretch from life sciences, exact sciences, engineering, medicine, all the way to social sciences, humanities, arts, management, and law. And internationalization, just to give you kind of an overview of our strategic goals, internationalization is one of Tel Aviv University's top 3 strategic priorities, alongside multidisciplinary research and connections with the industry. So we work on internationalization on 3 main tiers, like many other universities. First and foremost, building our research network with leading institutions around the world, attracting top students from abroad as a kind of a second tier, and as a third tier, our topic here for today, which is internationalization at home. So the point that I really want to make is that when I became a vice president in charge of this strategy, what I saw to be perhaps the largest challenge for promoting internationalization at home institutionally was that it tended to be treated as a separate goal and a separate set of practices from other aspects of internationalization on campus. At Tel Aviv University, it used to be that incoming international students were handled by one administrative unit, while exchange programs for Israeli students were handled by another. The development of courses in English and EMI was handled by a third unit. And meanwhile, of course, every school and every department and almost every individual researcher on campus handled independently things like inviting guest faculty from abroad, running international conferences, managing global research projects, and so on. So under these very decentralized circumstances, it became very clear to us that when it comes to internationalization at home, we were not only being inefficient, but we were being wasteful of what is really an abundance of opportunities to build on international activities that anyway already exist on campus in order to give our local students significant international exposure without necessarily having them travel abroad. So in 2022, we received a very large donation of around $18 million to increase internationalization, and we use it primarily to transform the vision and the structure of internationalization in such a way that it will bring together under one umbrella in campus all internationally oriented activities within what is now called the Lowy International School. So international partnerships, international students visiting, international faculty, a lot of the global research activities, international conferences, EMI support, international mobility of students and of staff, and a lot more, all centralized under the umbrella for international school now that has become a very large school with over 50 administrative staff members, all working in very tight collaboration. And what this really allows us to do is to cross-pollinate and work together. So, for example, now when a school or a department invite a scholar from abroad to Tel Aviv University, we know about it and we manage the visit. And this allows us to incentivize the department to have the visitor also include some teaching component, an intensive course or a series of lectures to Israeli students, which we can then open also to our international students. So with a visit that at one time would have gone by with really very little impact beyond a specific department or a field, we've now created an opportunity for Israeli students, not just to get exposure to ideas that come from abroad, but also to spend meaningful time with international students, and so to immerse also in an English-speaking environment, and so on. So that's one example. Really, every aspect of our activities now, we try to cross-pollinate in that way through the international school. So my main point really is this, for institution, particularly one where English is not the primary medium of communication, if we want to upgrade internationalization at home, it can't just rely on mobility programs, which typically cater to a small portion of the student body and tend to be less accessible to students who come from minority or first-generation communities. Instead, we really have to build on existing international connections and activities that happen on campus anyway by centralizing and incentivizing these activities and opening them up to as many local and international students as possible. And with that, I'll stop. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much. You've really touched on so many important dimensions of the question, and I'll come back to you with a couple of questions later. Thank you, Milette. Professor VIVEKANANDAN, if I could invite you to outline your positionality in today's discussion, where you're coming from, and then give us your valuable thoughts.
Okay, thank you. To all of you down there, right? So my background has been as a law professor or a law lecturer to professor, and today as a vice chancellor of an university. And I was specializing in the beginning constitutional law, and later on I moved to intellectual property rights, where I have been there for quite more than 2 decades. And my international connection has been visiting and lecturing in other universities, mostly in Europe and the United States, as well as negotiating on behalf of the government in World Intellectual Property Organization relating to copyrights, expressions, many things. So it's a long way of, as you pointed out, it's a kind of a flow that you have different thoughts, and then how do you really do this? If I put very few words in a very macro perspective, what I thought about this topic is, I would say that, of course, I'm speaking from a law school as KALYANI comes from. So I'm limited to more from a law perspective what I'm talking about this topic. So I would say that the Think Global and Act Local legal educationists all over the world started serious efforts to study other jurisdictions. It is less than 100 years in a sense, which was more an intellectual curiosity. Soon the consolidation of this world trade, global business expansion of the private sector and state-led corporation made it as a necessity for lawyers involved in business law practice to study other jurisdictions to start with. The non-business segment of lawyering started much later, gaining traction in mapping issues of human rights, refugee issues, gender, privacy, now LGBT rights, transparency in governance, global health and environment. I would put it the American and European jurisdictions made their strides much early in the last few decades to map and integrate these divisions with specialized studies, scholastic chairs, research and think tanks. They also had and still have the advantage of attracting the frontline academic aspirants from the third world to contribute to such efforts. This is manifested in the educational diplomacy, I would call it, of dominant views in terms of academic collaboration, publications, legal databases, international negotiations, and governance prescription. When I come back to India, The challenge, as you said the word South, I'm more putting it from Indian perspective, or developing nations in another way, is to analyze, invigorate, and invent their legal education to bring themselves in some connect with their other counterparts to prioritize agenda. I would say 4 are important. One is imparting quality legal education is fundamental. The last decade has witnessed, in a way, numerous law programs, but a preliminary audit will reveal the question mark of quality vis-a-vis quantity. So there is a collective onus of the legal fraternity of academics, lawyers, and policy wonks to look at this connect in terms of internationalization. Second, I would say that this word internationalization is, in my opinion, what you gave the topic is a little better than the word globalization, because often globalization is said of one particular model prescribed for all, whereas the word international, we are in a way talking sovereign nation states. And so it should be understood in a coalition of a political, social, economic milieu of expanding values of transparency, probity in public and business transaction. This is not new for Indian legal fraternity in a way. We also had our internationalization in Nalanda University long back, but we somewhere lost the traction. And so it is time to rediscover this legal prowess displayed in the national, international arena. Third point I would put it is developing a national consortium of research in legal education in Indian context. This, our home, I call it. This requires human and economic resources. It also needs collaboration and cooperation in research by institutes in the national arena, apart from looking at international collaboration. Finally, the recent advances of science and technology have proven and given a new meaning to internationalization in terms of interdependence by biodiversity, food web, trade and commerce, sustainable development, and futility of arms race. This concept of this international legal education needs to be the GPS for such a roadmap, and Indian legal tradition and aspirations can stake its legitimate claim based on the glimpses of the contribution of the past, and when one can work at it. Interestingly, I had yesterday, president of the consortium of National Law Schools of India, university. All of us bear the word national, the emphasis. But national emphasis doesn't mean one looks only in national, as I would only conclude, where I cannot, leave quoting this great gentleman from India, who lived long back physically, but lives in our memory, Mahatma Gandhi, who said, I keep my windows open for winds to flow from all sides, but I will never allow myself displaced by it. So this is a very fantastic philosophical quote where we try to bring in, through international, we are talking about a balance of what is national and what is the best practice in international. So in that context, I'm not getting into the micro details, which my earlier speaker did come out because of our exposure of international, but I would say that India is looking at it, and probably Jindal has taken a bigger lead as a private university, and many national law schools are doing it now, trying to work out how do they want to interface this internationalization, but at the same time look at home as something which is stable and very centrally focused to us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Vivekanandan. Your remarks really resonated with me because you dealt with internationalization of higher education as very much a subset of international relations. It's very much a dynamic that is operating, which reflects international politics, right? And the hierarchies.
You cannot remove both.
You cannot deal with one without reference to the other. So in that sense, I was very thrilled to identify that I shared that positionality with you. And I will come back to you with a couple of questions. But let me now invite Professor ORFANÖ to make her opening comments, please. Yeah, Barbara.
Thank you so much. First of all, I would like to greet the organizers and also my colleagues who share with me this panel. So far, I have been listening to you attentively, and I have also already learned a lot from your talk. So it's been very inspirational. Internationalization at home is a theme of paramount importance for us. I do believe that it's especially from our context, and I will let you know a little bit of it. I am a professor before taking the position of Deputy Dean of International Affairs in the university. I also worked with internationalization as a researcher because one of my main areas of expertise is international education. So I am interested in this theme as an academic and from a research perspective. I am an applied linguistic, and my area revolves around academic English, English for publication, and scientific writing and academic discourse. And for us, especially for over the past 15 years, Brazil has gone a transformative process for internationalization of its public institutions, with many government funding for mobility. You probably heard about the Science Without Borders, that it was one of the main international mobility programs that we have seen funded by the government. And that also generated the Language Without Borders program as well, which I was one of the pedagogical coordinators of that project. So internationalization at home in a Brazilian context is pretty much related to language proficiency as well, because language is a barrier for the Brazilian institutions in order for them to internationalize. So I will touch upon that issue later on as we have the opportunity to develop in our dialogue and in our conversation. So it's also very important for us as well to understand that we all know that internationalization, especially in the institution, it can mean different things for different contexts and for different groups as well. And our internationalization policy is based on a set of pillars, I would say that. So we take into consideration teaching, research, and outreaching programs. So being a public institution, we cannot dissociate our initiatives from our engagement with society. So our internationalization initiatives and projects, they need to be related to how we communicate with our community as well. So we have a lot of engagement with the community, and the internationalization initiatives and projects that we have somehow has an impact with the community, locally speaking, as well. So that is one component that we need to take into consideration as well. And another very important characteristic of this internationalization program and policy is it's seen as a means to achieve excellence. So it's not dissociated as internationalization, is including internationalization at home, is going to improve the quality of our teaching, of our research, and also the service that and how we engage with the community as well. So that is something that we need to have in mind as well. Another important point, especially when we talk about internationalization at home, is that in our context, data from UNESCO showed us, and recent data actually told us that 1% of University Brazilian students, only 1% of the population of University Brazilian students will have the opportunity to engage on mobility programs, which means that if we do not incentivize internationalization at home projects and initiatives, we will be dismissing or not contemplating 99% of our student population. So that is something that really, resonates with us. And something that is very important as well is that our internationalization policy needs to be inclusive and sustainable. We cannot have an internationalization policy that does not contemplate our academic and our student community as a whole. So with that in mind, we need to develop a program, a policy that take that perspective into consideration. So that all the initiatives and all the projects that we develop take into consideration that we have 99% of our students that will only have that opportunity to develop intercultural awareness, intercultural competence, and engage in a multicultural environment within campus domestically. That is our reality, and that needs to be contemplated as well, and we have to keep that in mind. As I mentioned as well, so we have to overcome the language barrier. We are the only country in South America speaking Portuguese, and we understand that we need to one of the questions that were raised here, and that was also comment, is what is the language of academia, for example? What is the language of the working market, and how our students are going to communicate globally with the world? So we have to concentrate as well. And if we are going to attract visiting scholars, if you want to develop an international community in our campus, we need to foster language proficiency as well. So we do invest a lot on language proficiency projects and programs for our community. And that involves a lot, not only students, but our academics. So we have special projects for English for academics, for example, that includes EMI, as my colleague also mentioned here, that in Tel Aviv. We have projects for publication, projects for academic presentations, for example. We have EMI projects. We also have for our admin staff, and we also have different projects for our students. We also have in place a language policy in our institution. So we have a language policy, and we have a committee managing and monitoring all the projects and all the initiatives that we have in our institution as well. So we invest in language proficiency quite substantially, and it is, I would say, one of the main components of our internationalization home, because that will give us subsidize the other projects that we have in place for our internationalization at home program and policy. Another thing that it's really important for us is to create an international environment in our campus. And what do we need in order to create this international environment in our campus? We could follow two paths. We have a more formal path and we have an informal path. Both are important, but they demand from us different strategies. The first path would be restructuring the curriculum. So we have created a set of disciplines that are taught in English and Spanish, and that allows not only our students to attend disciplines in English, to have discussions in English, to interact with in English and also in Spanish, but also to give our professors who have already had an opportunity to they did their PhD abroad, they did their postdoc abroad, they are already proficient in English, to keep practicing, to keep having visiting professors in their disciplines, develop their joint research, and also to give them a space to continue collaborating with their peers and also their networks, keeping alive as well with their peers. And also creates that, mirrors that environment that our students would probably have if they had the opportunity to go abroad as well. And we have in those disciplines as well, which is interesting and also helps us to boost interculturalness, is that we have a mix of our home students, our Brazilian students, and also our international students. So that is a space that is rich. It's very intercultural, because then they have a very variety in classroom. So it is a program, it is a project that is quite successful. Professors, they enjoy teaching those disciplines, and students, they enjoy also attending those classes. So that is one thing that is very important. Summer schools as well, they are quite popular and very important as well. We host a number of summer schools on different themes. The most popular one is the Summer School on Brazilian Studies. We have an average of 40 students a year, international students a year coming to Brazil, and they have a course on Brazilian studies that covers from politics to cultural issues, and they also have a component that is Portuguese as an additional language. And we also give our Brazilian students the opportunity to take part on these courses, so they have the opportunity to engage with the international community as well. As I said before, we have a lot of seminars, and we invest a lot of funding, and also teaming up with proposals and joint to welcome and receiving visiting professors in order to improve and to boost that capacity as well. In a more informal path, I'm just coining this way, we have a set of activities that promote this intercultural dimension. So we use the international students that we have as protagonists in that stream. So they can present their institutions, they can present their cultures, and they also develop a set of initiatives together with us. And I can comment on that when we have the opportunity in our questions. So from that, with that, I stop here, and I welcome your questions and your comments later.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Barbara. I'm so glad you brought up the point of connecting with local communities through internationalization. It's very much one of the aspects I had in mind when I talked about how internationalization at home really conjures this relationship between the global and local and how we re-examine it. So thank you so much. Last but not the least, Professor TOKAS. SHEKHAR, I invite you now.
Yeah, hello everyone. So I'm SHEKHAR. I basically work in Dr. B.R. Ambedkar University, which is situated in Delhi. We are a public state university. So where do I situate myself in this discussion on internationalization at home? I basically did my PhD on international students in India, and I specifically looked at motivations and experiences of international students in India. Luckily, my current administrative position also coincides with my research interests. So I'm also Deputy Dean of International Affairs Division at my university. So both my research work and administrative duty coincides in this area. As I understand, this session is basically wants us to talk about what could be the possible interventions on internationalization at home. I would be speaking largely with respect to my own experience, my research experience, plus one project that I'm doing currently on mapping of Delhi NCR campuses with respect to internationalization. So before I say anything on what should be the specific interventions on internationalization at home, I suppose we would want interventions to be more evidence-based. If yes, then I believe that first step towards internationalization at home is recognizing the fact that we don't have much data, and we are less aware of student and faculty motivations and experiences about internationalization in India. So, for example, I'm writing a research paper, which is a systematic literature review. And if you look at the Scopus database, you will find only 8 specific journal articles which are on internationalization of Indian higher education. So, as I said, I have been working in this field for the last decade and have the, I would say more of an ethnographic experience of engaging with over 100 students, international students in Delhi NCR, across 3 universities, that is Delhi University, Jawaharlal Nehru University, and Jamia Millia Islamia, all are 3 central universities in Delhi. And as I said, currently I'm doing a project on mapping of internationalization in Delhi NCR. So what are the facts? What does the evidence say? So whatever I'm going to say now is based on the research that I have done. I feel the first thing that we need to do is we need to recognize that leadership, as in academic leadership, faculty and students have diverse objectives of internationalization of higher education. Thereby, their understanding, motivations, experiences, and challenges are also different. At some places, they will overlap also. For example, if I have to ask leadership, so this is coming from a survey that I've done recently of 52 faculty members in Delhi NCR and 14 institutional level surveys. So 14 institutional level surveys and 52 faculty level surveys. So if I have to compare, as in how do leadership, faculty, and students understand internationalization of higher education. For leadership, understanding internationalization is largely about international collaborations and international student mobility, having more of international students. If we compare this with what do faculty understand by internationalization, or let's say what do they want from internationalization, it is primarily whether they can have research collaborations. At some places, we would say academic collaborations also, academic and research collaborations. What about students? How does student conceptualize internationalization of higher education? Again, we can categorize this into if a student is coming from developed country, if a student is coming from developing country. For a developed country student, it is less of classroom learning, less of a degree, acquisition of a degree, and more of accumulation of social emotional skills. If you look at the students coming from developing countries, for them, internationalization specifically means quality education, degree program. They want a degree program, quality degree program. So in a way, I may say they have nothing to do with, or they don't have those quote unquote intercultural competencies that we usually talk about. What about motivations of academic leadership, faculty, and students? Academic institutions are more bothered by rankings, international partnerships and rankings. Again, faculty is more bothered by enhanced quality publications, and students are more bothered by discipline-specific skills or intercultural or international competencies. If we look at the challenges, what are the challenges that are being faced by administrative leadership, faculty, and students? We see at the administrative leadership or academic leadership, the prime challenge that they are facing today is related to administrative and bureaucratic difficulties. What about faculties? Faculties are more bothered by limited institutional leadership, limited or insufficient financial resources, poorly resourced organizational structure, and again, administrative and bureaucratic difficulties. What about students? Do we let's say, as one of the countries who want more of students, international students, do we really have data or evidence on what are the motivations and experiences of international students? I would say we have only 3 to 4 studies which specifically look at the, let's say, narratives or take interviews of international students. So what are the prime challenges for international students? First is related to student support. Often we see international students are more ghettoized. Our classrooms are not inclusive in nature. Do our domestic and international students really interact with each other? So these are some of the questions. And again, one more challenge is that as we receive most of the students from developing countries, they have financial crunch also. So as a country, can we provide financial support to these international students who are coming from developing countries? So can there be a specific scheme like work, as in working specific schemes, so that they can learn and work also? There are some external challenges also. So these were internal challenges. There are some external challenges also. So first, external challenges that are faced by institutions today, specifically in Delhi NCR, is lack of funds. Second deals with difficulties of recognition and equivalences of qualifications. I would also say that to some aspect there are questions on capacity, faculty or academic leadership capacity about understanding the equivalence process. And again, there is lack of awareness among leadership, lack of awareness and interest among leadership about internationalizations per se. So what should be the interventions? I strongly believe that interventions, whatever interventions we want to propose, interventions should be primarily relating to students and faculty. I feel students and faculty are prime stakeholders in internationalization of higher education. With this, so this should be coupled with all the administrative ease that we need, administrative ease and administrative support that we need for faculty and students. So first intervention should be in terms of understanding motivations and experiences of international students and accordingly designing our policy vis-a-vis programs, courses, and student support. Second intervention should be understanding faculty motivations and providing support, enhancing their willingness, capacity, and commitment to internationalization of higher education. And another important intervention that I want to refer to is, can we also have ICT-based internationalization, information and communication-based internationalization? So I think that will be all from my side. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Shekhar. You know, when you were speaking, I was reminded of one problem that we constantly encounter, which is that although we have such great ideas on paper and our understanding through research and development about what these concepts should really look like, what should internationalization at home really look like, how can we achieve it, what are the ways that really work, what are the ways that don't work, how does it apply differently in different contexts. Although we are so now advanced in our understanding of all of that, so much of that is lost in translation to practice, right? Yeah. There's a realm of discussion in these matters, on these issues, which is almost cordoned off, sealed off, vacuum sealed from the world of practice, where we are still running our international programs. And that results in such diverse orientations of all the stakeholders that you mentioned. I mean, a lot of the work we have to do is, I guess, to operationalize our ideas a bit more so that they can reach all of these diverse constituents. Thank you so much for your remarks. Before I go to questions from the audience, I had sort of two chunks of questions. One, I think I will address commonly to Professor Shamir and ORFANÖ on the language question, which you both brought up. But first, I want to ask Professor Vivekanandan, how can we deploy internationalization in legal education to expand students' imagination on what they might use their legal training for? Do you think internationalization at home in the law school context can give students a different idea about, or a different vision for what they can do with their law degree? So, yeah, I had the language question saved for Milette and Barbara. Milette, you said that, you know, the primary language of instruction is not English at TAU. Barbara, you mentioned, yeah, Professor Vivekanandan, you're on mute.
See, I would say, that's what I said, it's a very macro question. But what I want to just tell is that this word internationalization, there are, I think I really was interestingly listening to Professor SHEKHAR about, you know, getting into the nitty-gritty of that. Internationalization, I'm looking at some spaces and their jurisprudence, or we are looking, for example, I'll just narrate a second that once I was some time back, I was in a conference in Tehran, along with a very, very powerful WIPO Deputy Director General. And I was much of a less known speaker. After we finished in that big auditorium of University of Tehran, and then we walked and talked to the Deputy Director General, who from the WIPO. General thought, am I a well-known figure in Tehran? I said, no, this is my first visit. I was just saying, so what they said, all of us studied in Delhi University. We studied in Delhi University. They started asking me different professors, some of them were with me in Nalsar University at that time. So I was suddenly looking. So India had an internationalization of a different kind. From Africa, from Asia, many of them came. I would say somewhere they lost in between. So why I'm bringing this point, the word internationalization, again, we need to contextualize what once we were a non-aligned movement. Today we are into a third largest thing. So a lot of changes are happening. But if you're asking the question, I would only answer that few days, the Parliamentary Committee on Law and Justice released a big report. And in fact, Raj was, one of the person who gave his views. I saw there. They are very, very categorically devoted. Few paragraphs about, not just about the importance of internationalization. They talked about funding provisions, many things they have brought inside. So, not to get exposed or to have a career, but it stopped with that. And we had a certain level of internationalization, which basically from a third world perspective what we had. So I would say last few decades, we were, disconnected in many ways. And we are very fast finding the roots of that, how to do this. As Professor Shekhar put it with this empirical evidence, is very many ground reality about especially what you call as mindset, and then also finance and few things. But I think it's not insurmountable. I consider many, at least I can talk for national law schools, at least top 10 schools have minimum 15 to 20 kind of linkages with the people. We started it is called HNLU, Exchange Academy, where we started signing few, and we even invited professors to come and stay and do. So as you said that, you also said that not only ideas, we knew it long back. But as I said, I would say that there was a paralysis, I would call it, for vague reasons. So sometimes we started looking internally. They think that external thing is a thing which is coming in. And then sometimes it is said that looking at external thing is the best. That's what I said. The best fit is, where do we find this internationalization concept and various things which flow, which will bring in a kind of connect between national interest and international best practices. And this is the thing which I consider, as you said, that at least I can only speak for my school, or the few law schools, Bangalore where I worked, Hyderabad I worked, students by second, third year are very, very clear about certain things. Very, very clear about certain things. Funds are a problem sometimes, but they're very clear. They work for 2 years, earn their own money, and then they have a plan to move and do. But ideally speaking, if it is institutionalized at what you call internally, that will benefit a large number of people, and the pace could be better in understanding, notwithstanding, again, I tell, coming to a clarity or the contours of what is internationalization. It is not just mere students and the great academics we all meet, but there is also, it is, as I said, it is part of a larger agenda always among sovereign states, including India.
Thank you so much for addressing that in such detail. I want to come to the language question, which I was just in the middle of putting to Milette and Barbara. You both spoke of English not being the language of instruction, let's say, as being somewhat of a hurdle to surmount on the route to internationalization at home. Is there any way in which it is an advantage? I ask that question because then internationalization can really be coming from where you are and then reaching out to the world rather than being within the English system already. I also ask this question because in the new education policy of the government of India, there's definitely an emphasis on multilingual education, and letting students reclaim the advantage of being multilingual and being speakers of many languages rather than developing an inferiority complex because of it. So is there any way in which that can be an advantage is what I was really curious about hearing from you. Milette first and Barbara to follow, please. Just in a couple of minutes, because I have received a few audience questions, which I would also like to put to you.
Okay, I'll try to be quick. I think it's an excellent question, and I do think that alongside what is our major effort, which is to get our students to study more in English and to be more proficient in English, we also have a responsibility as a university to make sure that we put an emphasis on our local languages. And at Tel Aviv University, this means offering Hebrew, Arabic, and even Yiddish programs to students who come from abroad, and making sure that alongside our emphasis on English, there are also opportunities to cultivate the learning of languages and cultures that are local. So it's certainly, I think, an advantage where students have access to both the world of kind of the globally spoken lingua franca and a strong grasp of a whole cultural baggage that comes with an additional language. But I will say, I was listening with great interest to Professor Shekhar's presentation, kind of mapping out of the different interests that are involved in internationalization. And it occurred to me that what's maybe missing from this map still is those on campus who are not interested in internationalization. And that is perhaps the biggest hurdle. And oftentimes these are the students who are fearful, they're both desirous of understanding that English proficiency is a very important element in their future careers and beings as citizens of the world, but at the same time are very resistant and fearful psychologically that the burden of studying in a language that is not their native language is too great to bear. And this is, I think, particularly true in our case of our 20% of students who are Palestinian and for whom English is a third language, not a second language, because Hebrew is their second language. And so I think that the main challenge that we face is how to overcome that psychological barrier. And I think that can be done easily, in fact. In some ways, there are techniques that simply do a little bit of tweaking, but manage to persuade students that it's actually not such a huge deal to doing part of their education in a language that is not their own. For example, one of the things that we did at the university is rather than say, as we have for many, many years, that all our graduate courses are taught in Hebrew unless there is an international student in the classroom, in which case we switch to English. We just tweaked it to say that all our languages on the graduate level, particularly in STEM, are in English. And then if there's nobody in class who needs the English, they can switch to Hebrew, which amounts to the same thing exactly, but somehow completely changed the students' mindset in regards to studying in English, because it's now their expectation to study in English, and it doesn't come as a kind of an added obstacle or burden. So, we try to do a lot of that. We try to do a lot of, to give a lot of support for both teachers and students who are doing English medium instruction and learning. And I know Barbara has a lot to say about that as well, so I'll stop here and give her a chance to talk about that too.
Yeah, well, my contribution is going to be pretty much similar to what Mile has just mentioned. We have a language policy that also advocates and wants to advance in that perspective of plurilingualism and multilingualism. Of course, that we want to foster and we want to incentivize our students to participate in a more global community, and seeing English as a lingua franca is important, but we also have some resistance on that as well. And there are some political statements about that as well that we cannot ignore. Another important thing for us is that in our understanding is that the value of our languages, we don't want one language to be seen as more important than the other. So this is also an issue. It is a premise that is also of equal importance for us as well. And we also advocate and we also put forward the idea, and we have the idea to foster Portuguese as an additional language for our international students. So there is a lot of courses and incentives for not only promoting Portuguese as a foreign or as an additional language. Now we are using much more the term as an additional language than foreign language for our international students, because we want to promote Portuguese language as well as a language of science, and also to make it more widespread around the world. We feel it is our duty in the academic context to do that. We also have a duty as researchers and as academics as well. We have more than 200 indigenous languages in Brazil, and we need to promote those languages as well. So it is a robust language policy that tries to, make them all alive in that perspective. So, and another important thing is the Spanish language, as I said. So we are surrounded, our neighbors, they all speak Spanish. So it's important for our students, we want to promote the Spanish language as well. So to promote multiculturalism, and also it is a language policy, it is as important. And as I said, we don't want one language being on the top of the others. But we, at the same point, we want to be quite democratic in that perspective. We want to make sure that we offer a set of opportunities for our students, and they can choose whatever is important for them. Another thing that is also talking about mapping, according to their area of expertise or the area of study and their discipline, we understand, and the partnerships that we have, we understand that some languages are important for them. For example, for our engineering students, we have a lot of partnerships with France. We have established research connections in that region. So we have specific programs developed for that group, because we know that they will take.
Thank you. I'm just conscious of time. Sorry to cut you off there, Barbara. Final question from the audience, which I do want to get to, and I'm so glad I saved it for you, Shekhar. Within the Indian context, are internationalization efforts being led by internationalization experts or professionals? Your take on that in 1 minute before we close the session.
See, I would specifically say there's a lot that needs to be done. I would actually name few scholars. KALYANI is one of them. Professor Maushmi Mukherjee is another one. And I have been trying to work on this area. And then NIPA, faculty of NIPA is also doing good work. But again, I feel that, as I said, that most of the research that we are doing is more theoretical and conceptual in nature. We need to go to the field. We need to understand the motivations of what are the motivations of students. Ultimately, we want to the prime stakeholders of internationalization are students, and we can include faculty also in that. So we have to understand our motivations. We have to incentivize our faculty. We have to, perhaps in some cases, we have to enhance their capacities. We have to, as I said, we also need to look at whether our faculties are overly burdened by administrative work. If you look at our private and government institutions, faculty is already doing a lot of administrative work, a lot of clerical work faculty is doing. So how do you incentivize faculty?
Very good point, Shekhar.
How
Very
do you
good point.
incentivize faculty? If faculty has no willingness to internationalize. They feel that if they can teach and perhaps publish one paper in 1 to 2 years, they don't want to go to field. They just want to publish. They don't. So one thing is that we should have incentive in form of our international work should be recognized. Recognized in the sense that some incentive we should get. It could be monetary or otherwise. And
I'm afraid we've run out of time. My short answer to this question is that we are listening here in India. We are listening to experts, but we are listening to experts who have a stake in maintaining international higher education in the hierarchical form that it is now. Simply because then Indian students continue to associate quality education with a foreign degree, and that's how that's how so many international students are internationally mobile for this very reason, which really brings us right back to internationalization at home and why it is still a significant conversation to have. I want to thank the panelists so much for their time and sharing their amazing experiences and their wisdom with us today. I'm going to call this session to a close now. Thank you very much. Have a lovely evening.